Alright, now this looks promising. Just need to figure out what year it is, though.
The year is 2011.
Oh, that's right, my commander decks.
You need to find an ally. I suggest the person known as Kaalia.
Great, where am I gonna find a goth chick in 2011?
Kaalia, we talked about this. You can't bring in these demon-slaying swords into work anymore. I mean, look at this thing. Yeesh. Listen, I'm sorry, Kaalia, but we're gonna have to let you go.
Hey, I see you lost your job for bringing in ancient relics of untold horrors. Yeah, you're just what I'm looking for. What's up, Planeswalkers? How you doing? How you doing? Today we're talking about an OG commander that some might call a dead horse. But here on the Moot channel, we don't have any reservations. Plus, there have been a lot of new cards since anyone's made a video about this commander, so I think you can stand to learn something today. So who are we talking about? It's Kaalia of the Vast, a Mardu and 1 colorless 2/2 human cleric that says whenever Kaalia attacks an opponent, you may put an angel, demon, or dragon creature card from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking that opponent. So today we're cheating, but not the kind your GF does. No, today we're cheating out big creatures with the hope to catch our opponents off guard and take them out. Unfortunately for us, Kaalia is well known, so people usually know what you're up to, and that's why I put a small twist on the usual deck list you'd see. You'll still keep the common strategy of rushing out our commander and using it to cheat out expensive creatures, but how you secure that win will change slightly. Before I get started, if you're new here and you want to improve your magic gains, then consider subscribing. The first thing I want to cover is the bombs of the deck, as these are the cards that we're going to rely on to win us the game. For people already familiar with Kaalia, then this part is going to look pretty similar to your average build. First we have Master of Cruelties, which is a classic combo piece with our commander that we can use to take a problem player out. Since the Master has First Strike, it's going to lower the life total to 1 and then let our commander finish the job. Ancient Copper Dragon is not going to kill an opponent, but the amount of treasures we get to make off this damage trigger can easily put us in the winning spot of the game. Aurelia the War Leader is another combo piece in our deck. Combined with Helm of the Host, we can have infinite combats. However, even fairly played, this card does go pretty crazy with our commander with that extra combat. Bloodthirster is a bomb for the same reason as Aurelia, however it doesn't have that same combo potential thanks to some extra text at the bottom of the card. Hellkite Tyrant is a great way to take an opponent's ramp while also putting a ticking time bomb on the battlefield. And of course, depending on your meta, this card's power scaling may go up or down, so if you're looking for cuts, then I'd probably start here. Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight, is going to double the damage our opponents take and make burning us or our creatures way harder. I'm pretty big on this card as the double damage can be taken advantage of by any opponent at the table, so I found this card can help your opponents take each other out. Lord of the Void is just a fun card that lets you steal a creature from your opponent, so naturally this card, like the Hellkite, gets better or worse depending on your local meta. Saphara's Sky's Blade is a bomb for us since the vast majority of our creatures, including our commander, have flying, meaning they'll become indestructible, which is important when our strategy relies on combat damage. Sarah's Emissary is just a really powerful beat stick that can be harder to remove than most creatures. The best part of this card is that it gives protection to you and all your creatures for the chosen card type. Terror of Mount Valus is not game winning on its own, it would only be 14 damage including your commander. However, if you throw in a few more attackers, this card can quickly turn into lethal very fast. Avacyn, Angel of Hope, is a good way to make sure removing anything from your board is hard for your opponents, and depending on the colors that they're playing in their deck, it might be impossible. And finally, Helm of the Host, because who doesn't love making tokens of the best creature they have and then comboing off with a red-headed Angel Lady. Now, to cheat out those bombs, we're going to need to get our commander out as fast as possible. That means we're going to need to play some cheap mana rocks such as Sol Ring, Arcane Signet, and Chromatic Lantern, which is pretty important since if we do have to play our cards fairly, this is going to let us get the colors. Boros Signet, Orzhov Signet, Rakdos Signet, Talisman of Conviction, Talisman of Hierarchy, and Talisman of Indulgence. Black Market Connections going into our ramp category because it makes treasures. It does do quite a bit more, but primarily we're playing it for its treasure ability. Smothering Tithe, which it's debatable to consider this card ramp, but I do since this card makes a lot of mana, and again, it lets us play our creatures fairly. It's worth mentioning that if you want to upgrade the deck further, consider adding Dockside. I chose not to include this card as I find it a little bit boring and a lot of people tend to hate this card. This next part of our deck, called Interaction, which may seem foreign to my combo players out there, is where our deck deviates from the usual list. We're going to use stax pieces to stop players at the table from running away with the game. For people new to my videos, I consider cards that create or solve problems interaction. Drannith Magistrate is going to make sure other players can't play their commanders. Among other things, this card I know a lot of people hate, and if you want to scale down the deck and be a little nicer to your opponents, then definitely take this card out. Grand Abolisher is going to make sure we don't have to worry about anyone interacting with us on our turn. It's important when we're trying to combo off. Eliasa Forgotten Archangel will help us clean up the graveyard sack decks while making our creatures annoying to remove. Steel Hellkite is a massive removal piece that can absolutely decimate someone's board, and we can cheat it in with our commander for some surprise. Angelic Arbiter will force our opponents to choose between attacking or casting spells. We're hoping this card can be useful and buy us some time against the really aggressive decks. Balefire Dragon is another card that we can sneak into a player with our commander to destroy their board. This time though, we're restricted and it's just their creatures, but it's damage based, which is good for our Gisela. Chancellor of the Annex helps us compete with a lot of decks for the sole reason that if we have in our opening hand, we can slow fast mana decks down slightly. That slightly being the difference between a turn 1 Sol Ring for our opponents, making this card really good. Of course, it's also annoying if we cheat it out with our commander for an extra tax on all our opponent's spells. Platinum Angel is the perfect way to force certain combo decks to cough up some removal. Either way, this card is always going to have to be dealt with. Swords to Plowshares for some cheap exile removal, D-Spark for bigger permanents, and Anguished Awakening for everything else besides lands. Speaking of non-lands, we have Stroke of Midnight for some removal or problem permanents. Deflecting Swap for some free protection because our commander is going to be targeted with removal quite a bit. Teferi's Protection for, you guessed it, more protection, and Farewell because a panic button is always nice to have. Winter Orb is our first stax piece that's going to slow down our opponents. This is a double-edged blade though, so we need to make sure our commander is out before we play it, and if our commander gets blown up while it's out, then things get kind of bad. So I will say it does take a little know-how to get the best value out of this card, but it's nothing practice won't fix. Now, these following cards can be summarized as cards that limit the amount of spells that a player can cast in a turn. We like this since we don't plan on casting more than one or sometimes any spells in a turn. Deafening Silence, which won't stop the creature decks, High Noon, and Rule of Law. This next section is going to be the support cards. These cards will aim to help our commander swing in or find combo pieces. Burning Room Demon for its tutor ability, and tutors are scary in our deck since the Master of Cruelties means we have access to a one-shot with our commander. Runescarred Demon is another tutor so that we can up the consistency of our deck, and the body is nice. Lion Tutor, as we'll want to grab a haste enchantment as a default, although you have some options. Vampiric Tutor is a cheap tutor that doesn't have the restriction, and again, playing lots of tutors ups the consistency of your deck. Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots will provide haste and protection for our commander, and it can't be overstated how often people will try to blow up our commander. Reconnaissance is mainly here if we run into a game where we can't safely swing our commander into anyone. This way we can remove it from combat before any damage would be dealt. Dragon Tempest gives haste to all the flying creatures, which is almost all the creatures we play, and the last ability isn't too important, but we actually can trigger it, so it's worth mentioning. Earnest Fellowship is protection for our commander, as Mardu colors do have a lot of targeted removal. Rising in the Day is more mass haste, and when you're playing a commander that has an attack trigger, we'll want it. The last part of our deck, we'll just call this Value Pile. This will include some cards that work with our strategy or just bring in a lot of value. Esper Sentinel for some early game card draw. One of the downsides with this card though, of course, is that we actually can't grow its power, meaning later in the game it becomes almost worthless. Tear the Peaks is a fun thing to cheat out, and it will always get everyone at the table scared, and for good reason, as we can dish out a crazy amount of damage since our commander cheats out big creatures. Saw in Half, which we plan to use on our own creatures as an answer to removal or sometimes just to get more value. You want to use it on creatures like Tear the Peaks, for example, that I just went over. Villa's Broker of Blood will be used to draw lots of cards, and we have a few cards like Black Market Connection that work well with it. Ancient Brash Dragon for some recursion that triggers off damage. This works well with our commander, of course. Rhea Dawnbringer is more recursion, albeit slower than the dragon. However, with the amount of removal people play, it's worth running a few sources of recursion. Stronic Resonator is to copy our commander's ability along with any of the abilities that come in our bigger creatures, like the Ancient Dragons. Palantir of Orthrank is a perfect way for us to draw an extra card in our turns, and if our opponents do make us mill, first, they have a high chance of losing a lot of life, and secondly, we're playing a decent amount of recursion. Phyrexian Reclamation so that we have some non-creature based recursion. Sneak Attack is our final card, and what a card it is. I debated putting this card in my bomb pile as this card can win games, however it generates so much value thanks to all the creatures that we play that have swing or damage abilities that I decided to put it in the value pile. We are playing a lot of recursion also to support this card since it burns to the creatures we use when we cheat them out with it. For the mana base, follow your heart, or better yet, follow your budget, but if you'd like to copy a mana base, then feel free to copy the mana base found in the description of this video. I went with a pretty balanced list that can be made cheaper by cutting a few lands like Ancient Tomb. My recommended land for this deck is Monumental Henge, as you can activate this land to try and grab a creature for Kaalia to cheat in if you're empty-handed. For the combo section, I'll be covering the Master of Cruelties combo as I've covered the Helm combo in previous videos. So for this combo, Kaalia of the Vast must be on the battlefield, Master of Cruelties must be in hand, and Kaalia of the Vast does not have Summoning Sickness. An opponent cannot block Kaalia of the Vast or their Master of Cruelties. To start, attack with Kaalia. Kaalia of the Vast triggers, causing you to put Master of Cruelties from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. When Master of Cruelties isn't blocked, it triggers, causing the defending player's life total to become 1, causing Master of Cruelties to deal no combat damage, of course. Then, Kaalia of the Vast will deal the lethal combat damage to that player. That's going to be all for today's video, and I do hope you enjoyed it. Let me know how I did, or tell me about your favorite Mardu card in the comments below. If you've made it this far in the video, then thank you, and I'll see you in my next schizophrenic intro. Peace.